All right, everybody, we're starting at chapter 3 of Sharon Draper's Copper Sun, Sorrow and Shackles. When the sun rose next morning, Amari looked with horror at what was once her tribe's village. All of the homes had been burned, their roofs of thatch and walls of reeds consumed by the fire. The charred and bloody bodies of relatives remained where they had fallen, with no one to perform proper rites for burials, no one to say the prayers for the dead. Amari knew that the pale strangers probably did not know their customs, could not understand the seriousness of the proper burial procedures, but the Ashanti were people of her own land, supposedly brothers in spirit with Amari's people. How could they do this and face their own future? She wondered in horrible confusion. It was just one of many questions for which she had no answer. Where did these strangers come from? Why do they want to hurt us? How can I continue to live without my family? It took all of her strength not to look at the bodies of her parents. Amari's heart hurt in a way she could never have imagined. So just to stop there for a moment, cultures all over the world, ancient cultures, modern cultures have their own burial rituals that they perform when people die. So for example, in ancient Greece around that time, if someone died, they would get 2 coins because they believed that a spirit would come and put them on this river in this boat and take them over to the land of the dead. But you would have to pay him the 2 coins. That's why you would always get buried with 2 coins on your eye. In a Western, it was called the Searchers. I would Google just to make sure this is actually true. But in one Native American tribe, if one of the dead lost their eyesight, like if someone shot out their eyes or something, they would just wander their afterlife. They wouldn't be able to find the homeland of the afterlife that they would need to. So there's plenty of customs like that people take very, very seriously. The Yui tribe that she is a part of, that Amari is a part of, also has procedures and rituals for burial, and for no one to recognize those, even though they killed all those people, not to have the respect to bury them the proper way, for their souls to rest, for their ancestors to rest. That's something that's almost unconscionable to Amari. So just a little background of that. All right, next paragraph. 24 of the villagers had survived the slaughter. She glanced around the group and realized that most of them were around her age, young and fairly healthy. None of the elders had been spared, none of the children. Essie and her new husband, Makofui, huddled together, even though they had been shackled apart. Amari knew that Essie was carrying her first child, for she had announced with joy just 2 days before. Amari also had seen that the parents of both Makofui and Essie were included among the dead. Kawazo, a young man known in the village as a fierce hunter, pulled angrily at his shackles, his wrist already bleeding as he fought their restraint. A huge gash on his head had stopped bleeding, but was open and untreated. He needed the medicine woman to wrap it in healing leaves, but no one seemed concerned about his injury. All of the young male captives had sustained some type of injury. Finally, at the far end of the huddled circle of captives, Amari spotted Bessa. He looked at her with glazed, saddened eyes. In the distance, where such a short time ago he had played with such power and joy, she spotted his beloved drum, crushed in its splinters in the dirt. Amari wished she could smile at Bessa to give him hope, but she had no hope to offer. He looked away. Suddenly, one of the pale-faced men with the death sticks came over to them, shouting in a language she did not understand. He made it clear, however, that they were to get up from the ground immediately. Most of their captors, both black and white, carried both whips and fire sticks. Amari looked around in fear and tried to ask what was happening, but all she received in response was a vicious slice of a whip across her arms and neck. She cried out as she arched her back in pain, but she hurried to her feet and asked no more questions. She glanced at Bessa. His face was distorted with anger. One of the pale men then brought out objects that she would not have used even on animals. They were similar to the iron bands on her wrists, except these fit around their necks. A length of iron chain connected each neckband, so each was linked to the next in a single file of chains in captivity. As the iron band was placed around her neck, Amari felt as if she would choke. It was cold and heavy and cut into her shoulders. The chain was then pulled sharply as the next person in line was shackled behind her. Amari could not turn and see who it was. She could barely see, only the back of the person in front of her. It was Tirza. Or she could only see the back of the person in front of her. It was Tirza, the young woman who just hours before had been chasing that runaway goat. Tirza could not stop shaking with fright. So they have these big neck shackles around their necks, and they're connected to the next person. So they don't have a lot of movement. They're not able to turn their necks that easily left or right. So really, they want you just focus on the person in front of you. The pale-faced men fastened similar irons on their ankles with a short length of chain between them and a longer chain linking each person in the coffle together, thus making it impossible for them to run away or even walk very fast. Fastened together in groups of 6, the wrists, ankles, and necks of each captive were painfully connected to the person on either side. Once the villagers were all linked, a white face pulled the first person with the rope, and those linked to him lurched forward as well. Amari stumbled, but the neck iron stopped her fall. She choked and tried to grab her throat, but her arms were shackled as well. Gasping, she fell into step with the others, who, with heads bowed, shuffled together toward they knew not what. Bessa, Amari noticed, was in the front of his coffle of captives. He would not look at her, glancing away whenever she tried to catch his eye. She realized he must be feeling terrible shame that he could not rescue himself or Amari, or change any of what was happening to them. So you got to remember, this is a hit to their pride, especially the guys. Men in ancient times, or not even ancient times, but just back in all time, men have a pride, and they're thought to be able. Their one job is to protect their family, protect their friends, and here's Bess not able to protect anyone in his tribe and the love of his life, the woman he was supposed to marry, and here they are, chained and captives, and going somewhere where they don't know what's going to happen to them. If one in their group stumbled, all of them stumbled, or sometimes even fell, choking as the chains pulled them down together. Beaten with whips if they failed to keep the pace, they headed slowly away from everything they had once known. The bright red pain across Amari's back and on her wrists and ankles made her whole body tremble. She felt as if she might pass out. The heat of the sun showed no mercy. She couldn't even wipe away the sweat that burned her eyes as it ran down her face. Her tongue felt thick. She was so thirsty, and she couldn't remember the last time she had eaten. As she walked, she tried, but couldn't comprehend the incredible cruelty of the men who had done this. Nothing made sense. Her stomach knotted up every time she thought of her last glimpse of her mother and father, dead, unburied, and covered with flies. And little Kwasi, he was just a small boy who had never even heard a grasshopper. How could he be dead? Amari felt dizzy, but she dared not stop or stumble. The first path they traveled was the long road that led from their village to the big river several miles away. It seemed as if even the trees bowed their heads as they passed. The birds, normally full of chatter, were silent as the group marched past them for the last time. Day after day, the captives walked, saying very little to one another or to their captors. One afternoon, Amari heard Quazo try to speak to one of the Ashanti who guarded them. "Why do you do this, my brother?" he whispered when out of earshot of the white soldiers. "Our tribes have been at war before," the Ashanti responded, a defensiveness in his guarded tone. "This time, however, I shall be greatly rewarded." He strode ahead then and said no more. Amari wondered what he meant. So sometimes, of course, you may hear lies, or they would hear lies about war, putting tribe against tribe to try to find slaves. You know, the slavers did whatever they needed to do to try to get their quota for slaves for that journey. So more than likely what happened, and we're never told explicitly, but more than likely what happened, the Ashanti were given money, jewels, something like that, told that they were going to war with the Yui for something that might have happened. Slavers may have even concocted something just to try to trick the Ashanti into going and helping them, get into this tribe. Because it probably would have been a little bit harder to try to fight off the Ashanti and the Yui to make them slaves. So you had to, you tried to make comrades where you could. So we never told explicitly, but that's what it seems is going on here. The wound on Quazo's head grew swollen and purple, and Amari could tell he was in pain. But he continued on, as they all did, one foot after the other, mile after mile. His face was one of anger and hatred. Bessa's face, when she got a chance to glimpse it, had become a mask. The captors were never unshackled. Each set of 6 ate together, slept together, and had to urinate and defecate together. They were given just a little food each morning and very little water. Each group was forced into a rhythm, keeping a pace that was difficult for the slowest and weakest of them as they marched. So think about that, just to stop for a little bit. Think about that, where you're already shackled and chained and you have to use the bathroom with all these people watching you while you're chained up, which means you're just going where you got to go, like right there. You know what I'm saying? Like right in that line. And then when you start walking, what's going to happen? You're going to have to walk through that, walk through someone else's waste. Because the slavers didn't care. They don't care that you got to use the bathroom. Just do it and keep it moving. They treated them like animals. So just think of that as a human having to deal and go through that. All right, just wanted to point that out. In Amari's group, it was Tirza who seemed to have given up. Oh, excuse me. No, each group was forced into a rhythm, keeping a pace that was difficult for the slowest and weakest of them as they marched. In Amari's group, it was Tirza who seemed to have given up. She walked slowly and stumbled often. Her back was soon a patchwork of welts from being whipped when she could not keep up with the rest. One night she whispered, "I cannot live like this, Amari. My parents, my sisters, all whom I love are dead. I'd rather die than be enslaved like this." "Tirza, stop talking like that," Amari whispered back. "We must live." "Why?" she asked dully. "Because as long as we have life, we have hope," Amari said fervently. "Hope of what? Escape, perhaps." "You are a dreamer, Amari," Tirza told her quietly. "I have no dreams left." And the next morning, Tirza was dead. She had simply ceased breathing during the night. The leader of their captors looked at her lifeless body and cursed. He unshackled her, tossed her body to the side of the road, and spat upon it. The rest of them were told to get up and move on. Amari was surprised and saddened to realize that the travel in their chain coffle, now 5 instead of 6, was lighter and easier without Tirza. Her heart, however, seemed to beat more slowly and heavily. None of them wept for Tirza or even looked her way as they passed. So, here goes a friend of hers, died right there. Just stopped having the will to live, stopped breathing, maybe smothered herself, who knows. But yeah, this is just the start of the trouble that some slaves had to deal with as they're walking to some destination that we should find out about in the next chapter. So this ends chapter 3, and we'll be at chapter 4 very soon. See you soon.